Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this beautiful day, another beautiful summer's day in the UK. Fingers crossed. We've done really, really well this year and I'm really enjoying it. Anyway, thank you for coming out the sunshine and taking the time to watch today's session. Today's session comes to you courtesy of the emotion guilt. Oh, I always feel like I'm introducing an episode of Sesame Street when I say that. Yes, today's show is brought to you courtesy of guilt. But seriously, guilt is something I've heard a lot about recently. It's something that's cropped up in a lot of conversations with friends, with family, with clients. And so I really felt I needed to do this video today just to encourage us to openly think about it and talk about it. And I want to encourage you, rather controversially, to embrace your guilt. So guilt is one of those emotions, one of those words that has had really negative stuff attached to it. It's become a really negative thing. A bit like, if you join me here regularly, you'll hear me talk about selfishness. I'm actually really passionate about being selfish, but for good reasons. In order to be really selfless, because I passionately believe, as you know, that unless you look after yourself first and get yourself in a good place, you are not in a good enough place to be helping other people, and you're a bit of a hypocrite. But anyway, that's a whole different session, different day, different Sesame Street. Today is about the guilt, and guilt is a real biggie, particularly for women over 40, particularly for women who may be mothers or carers. It is a real big thing. And like I say, it's come up a lot in conversation recently. So I really wanted to do this for you. It came up particularly in conversation with my lovely yoga girlies, my group that we have a great self-indulgent, selfish post-yoga coffee and chat session. And it's a bit like, we call it a bit of a group therapy session. And guilt comes up a lot, but particularly last week it came up in quite a big way, because we were talking about how it can stop you doing things, it can get in the way of you making decisions, it can get in the way of you being real and doing what you really want to do, and it can get in the way of you serving yourself. We're taught in the West, particularly, guilt from a really early age, and we're taught that is a bad thing to feel, that we should feel guilty about what we do, about what we don't do, about what we say, about what we don't say, about what we're thinking that we might do or say even before we've done it. And so that feeling of guilt can become quite a deep-rooted thing. And again, if you've joined me here regularly, if you're part of our little community here and you've checked in with me regularly, you know my story, you know a bit about my background, you'll know that I grew up until I was about 12 with my violent, paranoid, schizophrenic mother on my own with her. And she did guilt particularly well. Not feeling guilt, but imparting feelings of guilt. So I would feel guilty when she was having her episodes. You've heard me talk about the fact that she would lock herself away, or she would lock me away, and so that she didn't have to deal with the world. And so somehow I would feel guilty about that. I would wonder whether it was something I was doing or not doing, or saying or not saying, that was causing these episodes, because as a child I didn't understand what paranoid schizophrenia was. And so I would feel really guilty. But then to compound all that, when I was about, I think, 6 or 7 years old, my mother discovered Jehovah's Witnesses, and she became a baptised Jehovah's Witness. And boy, oh boy, oh boy, let me tell you, do they teach guilt really well. In fact, if it was an Olympic sport, they would definitely be up on the medal podium, let me tell you. And so that sense of guilt became compounded. And, I won't go into the details because I don't want to diss anybody's faith, and that's not what I'm here to do. There was a lot, by the way, about the Jehovah's Witness teachings that gave me a really good moral foundation, but there was a lot that caused a lot of emotional problems. And it just compounded everything that was going on with my mother, in her, the voices in her head and the broken glass in her head. And my feeling was that it just compounded all of that, because it justified this feeling of guilt. And for me, guilt is and can be an incredibly negative thing. It can get in the way of you making decisions. It can get in the way of you, like I say, serving yourself. It can get in the way of you just being who you really are and doing the things that you want to do. But here's the thing about guilt, and this came up in this conversation with my lovely friends last week, my yoga friends, and one fantastic friend in particular, and you'll know who you are if you're out there and you're listening to this. And she was brought up an Irish Catholic. And so, of course, we got into talking about guilt, didn't we? And about everything that means to us and all the obstacles it's presented us in our lives. But here's the thing about guilt. It can be a good thing too. I don't think guilt is all bad. Guilt and, those little pangs of guilt that you get, that they can stop you doing something that maybe you really shouldn't, maybe something that's going to cause somebody else harm, which I would never advocate, of course. It can stop you saying things that you really shouldn't say, that poison tongue syndrome. That's a good thing. But it also, having that ability to feel guilt in its good form, in its most precious form, is empathy and compassion. And who doesn't love those qualities? So without that ability to feel guilt, you wouldn't feel empathy and compassion. That's my particular feeling about it. But here's the thing, guilt can get out of control. And it can move from, or actually sometimes we find it difficult to differentiate the guilt from the empathy and the compassion. And so it all gets muddled up together. But if we can learn to identify guilt, and if we can learn about how to transfer that into feelings of empathy and compassion, let me tell you, it's going to transform not only your life, but everybody's life around you. Because that stuff spreads, right? And we really want to spread all that good stuff. So don't get too hung up about guilt, I think is what I'm saying to you. Don't get too hung up on it all being a bad thing to feel guilty. Yes, if it's out of control and you don't know how to manage it, you haven't got the skills you need to manage it, then it can really drag you down. It can become deep-rooted, and it can become, at best, procrastination. At worst, it can be really self-limiting. But if you can learn to harness that and turn it into just empathy and compassion, well applied, when it's needed and when it's appropriate, then that can be really powerful. So, today's message is, please embrace your guilt. Don't try to eliminate it, because people come to me all the time and say, the one thing I'd really love to do is stop feeling guilty about everything. Well, yeah, I want you to stop feeling guilty about everything, but I don't want you to lose that ability to feel guilt. I just want you to have the tools and the strategies you need to transfer it into something really positive. It's a bit like hypnotherapy. When I do hypnotherapy, when I used to do one-to-ones, I don't do a great deal of one-to-ones anymore at all. But when I used to do one-to-ones, clients would come to me and say, I want to get rid of my fear of heights. It's really terrifying and I want to completely get rid of my fear of heights. And I would say, I'm not going to do that. What would happen if I completely eliminated your fear of heights? You'd go climbing tall buildings and teetering off the edge, and who knows what might happen, what kind of danger you might get yourself into. That fear of heights is there as it's a protective thing, it's a self-preservation thing. It stops you getting into situations that are incredibly dangerous. But what we needed to do was turn down the volume on it, turn down the intensity of it, so that it didn't become limiting, so that it was no longer limiting. But eliminating fear of heights, trust me, is not a good thing. And it's the same with guilt. I don't want you to eliminate your ability to feel guilt. I just don't want you to feel guilty about everything all the time, to the point where it limits you being the best you and having the best life you can have, and having an incredibly fantastic, enjoyable life, the best life you can live. So that's my message for today. Please go embrace your guilt. And actually, there's something that just while I was talking to you here, I just thought about, a lot of what particularly women find difficult is saying no, because we feel guilty about feeling obligation to doing things for people. We often have a huge problem saying no. And then we get ourselves into all sorts of situations, don't we, where we feel guilty about the fact that we've said yes, and then we feel guilty about the fact that we might say no, and here it goes, perpetual cycle. Saying no is something that seems to be really difficult for people. Anyway, I've got something that can help you with that, that I've been using for years. Is really effective, a really effective strategy. It's a little document, little PDF document. If you are interested, if you struggle with this, if you struggle with guilt, you struggle with saying no, and you want to be able to say no but still be loved, not upset anybody and think that everybody hates you, then this could really help you. So if you're interested in having that, no problem, I can send it to you. Just pop your email address in the comments below and I will send that to you, absolutely no problem. So go have a fantastic day. Enjoy this beautiful sunshine, this beautiful UK summer, and go embrace your guilt. And I'll catch you next time.